How big of a jump can we expect from Paolo Banchero in year 2? We are talking about the Orlando Magic, Banchero, Wagner, Fultz, everybody on this team. It's going to be an interesting show. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_Beeble, on TikTok at redrock_Beeble, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. All right. We're here to talk Magic. I'll play the song. Don't worry. But we're going to talk just quickly about the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl. Warnie?
Let's get it on, Gilly.
All right. Remember, we are sending out invitations this week. The drafts will start at some point next week. At the moment, they are scheduled for October 1st. But some of them might push back a little bit for the last couple of those divisions. Draft order is not set. You will get a separate email with draft order on it, which will come from a draft order website, which will show you that there's no funny business going on with that draft order, so be on the lookout for that as well. Check your emails for invites, and we're going to have another application going later on in the show. For the points leagues or the category leagues, it's a slow draft. If you don't know what a slow draft is, and people have said to me they don't know what it is, it's a regular draft. Except instead of having 60 seconds, 45 seconds to make a pick, you have 7 hours. So if you are asleep or they're on the other side of the world or you haven't want a bit of time to think, you can. Obviously, you try and make your pick as quick as you can to get the draft to speed along. But you've got that little bit of time and you get an email that will say, hey, it's your pick or you're on deck to pick, so be ready for it. It's the best way, really, I think, of doing a draft because it gives you more time to think, more time to not make mistakes or skip your pick. Yeah, it can be, look, there are going to be people who go, it's his bloody draft, mate. It's going to take a week to get it done. Yeah, that's literally the point. That is how that's going to work. It will take time to get done. So don't worry about that. That's just how they go. It is the way that, especially when we're doing a worldwide competition, that how those slow drafts tend to go. There was something else. Someone asked me, hey, I don't understand what the 40 games max per week is. It means that your team can play 40 games for the week, maximum. That's it. You can't win by streaming in multiple players every single day. You don't get that 10-game advantage over your opponent because he's got 3 guys injured and 2 guys playing 2-game weeks. You can play 40 games a week. That is it. Simple. 10 active slots, 4 games in each active slot. That is it. Let's try and even the playing field in fantasy. Because one of the things I hear from people that complain about fantasy basketball, and it's so unfair, is, oh man, why do I have to care about the schedule disparity every week? Well, it's not fair. I'm already down 7 games compared to my opponent. We're done. 40 games. That's it. That's our max. So, should we talk about our Orlando Magic? Yeah, we should. The Orlando Magic have 47 quality games for the upcoming season. That's more than they've had in the past, I believe, because they've always been one of those teams, well, not always, in recent times been one of those teams that's been on a little bit of the lower end of quality games because they haven't been as appealing. This is a team that I think is pushing for the playoffs. We know that before they sat guys down the final 3 or 4 games of the season, they were 500 after Markelle Fultz returned, I believe it was, when they had all those injuries at the start of the year. If they're a 500 team, they're making the play-in at the very least, probably the playoffs, and that is without factoring in growth of Paolo Banchero, the growth of Franz Wagner, the fact that at this point, knock on wood, Markelle Fultz is entering the season healthy for the first time in about 4 years, because he didn't even start last season. We're going to put him under the lens in this show later on as well. I think they're going to be good. We'll see. They do have the most back-to-backs in the NBA, and that really only is going to be an impact for Voldemort, John Isaac, but he's not going to be starting. He's not going to be playing starters minutes, and he's probably not going to be a fantasy guy. He's coming off another surgery this last offseason. But we all know with Isaac, if he plays 24 minutes, he can be useful in 12-team leagues. I don't think he's going to, but he could. He could play those minutes, and those back-to-backs will be probably something he sits. They have the lowest amount of maximum game weeks, and by maximum game weeks, it's like how many weeks do you play the most games out of anybody in the league? And they have 12 of those. Usually, that is in every case basically a 4-game week outside of a couple of things like the start of the season and the All-Star break. Their playoff schedule is fine without being great. 4-3-3 to end on 24th of March. 3-3-3, which is actually pretty bad. A 9-game playoff schedule if you finish 31st of March. 3-3-4 for 7th of April. And 3-4-4 for the final week of the end of the season, which, of course, is the worst possible time that you could finish your fantasy. I'd rather you finish it at the All-Star game than finish it at the 14th of April, even though that means you're not going to be watching my show as often. I'm not about doing shit on this show just to get people to watch or to engage or anything like that. I'm about doing what's making it best for you. That's generally what my idea is. Let's make it fun. Let's make it informative. And let's try and make everything as best for you as we can. So I could tell you, man, play to the last game of the season so that everyone keeps watching the show and all that stuff. It's garbage. Don't do it. Again, I'd rather you finish in February than finish in April. Cool. What are some pressure points? Well, one of the biggest ones is what the hell happens with the guards. Because not only do they have Markelle Fultz, but they have a top 6 pick this season in Anthony Black. They have a top 5 pick from 2 years ago in Jalen Suggs. They have one of the only guys that can shoot in Gary Harris. They have Cole Anthony, who has proven to be a capable NBA starter, if not rotation player. And how the hell do they work it? Do they actually lean into 2 of those guys as their main players? Do they lean into one of them and then everyone else sort of fills in around them? That's the big question mark. Is at the moment, I think that Markelle Fultz is going to start and play 30 plus. But he might not. What if they say, no, Anthony Black's actually our future here? Markelle, you play 27 and you hand off the reins later on. What if Cole Anthony gets back in that mix? What if they decide to make Anthony a 2? I don't know. There are too many question marks with that. And what about John Isaac? He's got this non-guarantee in his contract. I actually don't think he's a part of their future, but I don't know that 100%. But if he is, like, maybe he plays 25 a night. I would find it hard to believe that he would. But their power forward rotation is not super strong. I guess you could find a situation where Franz gets the minutes at power forward behind Banchero. Banchero plays a little bit at the 5, and that does eliminate that. But at the moment, like, the backup forwards are pretty thin. Like, it's Joe Ingles, Jonathan Isaac, and Chuma Okeke. So how do they value Isaac? That's a big question, because, again, 25 minutes. He is a absolutely viable fantasy guy. For as much as we might have frustrations with so many things that have gone on with John Isaac over the last couple of years, we know that he can get steals and he can get blocks and get them in very big quantities. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. Wide range of betting options, totals, point spreads, over-unders, player props, money line straight up, parlays. It is all there. You guys say parlays. We call them multis here. I know I've said that before. But saying parlays just reminds me of Pirates of the Caribbean. Sorry, FanDuel, for giving a Pirates of the Caribbean reference in your ad. But that's where we're at. But maybe if we want to talk teams that are close to the Caribbean, you might want to put, or Caribbean, you might want to put and hey, that's another one. Sorry, FanDuel, let's go off track. I know Americans call it the Caribbean, but do you call the movies Pirates of the Caribbean, or do you call it Pirates of the Caribbean? There's a question for you. I don't know what the answer is. I just know that I always call it Caribbean. But the Miami Dolphins are rolling. The NFL season is off, and we have to be the Super Bowl favorites. We're not, but I'm sure we are. In my heart, we are anyway. Drop 70 on the Broncos, and if you want to put future bets on the Dolphins, you can do it. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. Who are some breakout candidates on this team? There's 3 guys that I've got listed there. You know my criteria for breakout candidates. Let's start with Franz Wagner. I am relatively high on Franz. I don't think it's out of pocket to suggest that he was their best player last season, because I think he very clearly was. Wagner averaged almost 19 points in year 2, 4 rebounds, 3.5 assists, a steal, 49 and 84 shooting, shot 36% from 3 in 33 minutes. That's all very, very solid. But we're in year 3 here. He's just won the World Cup. He was their best player. He might be their best player again. What if, and some of my criticisms of Franz last season was he just was a little bit passive at times and just like, I'm just going to do what the team needs me to do, which is great for winning, but for fantasy it doesn't always translate into big stuff. But what if he just gets this big boost and he goes, all right, let's go. 24 points, 7 rebounds, 4.5, 5 assists, cranks it up on defense, starts taking volume threes. He's good enough to do it. Whether the team structure demands that he does it, I don't know. But he is absolutely good enough. Again, that was year 2 from Wagner last season. That was year 2. Year 3, he might go absolutely through the roof. There's also the chance he sort of stagnates because that's the player he is, and he just sort of connects everything up. The other one is Banchero. And I know, again, how do you have a second-year Rookie of the Year winner as a breakout candidate? Because, again, it's all based on where I'm projecting them out. Banchero last season averaged 20 and 7 with almost 4 assists. That's really good numbers. 1-3, that's not great. 0.8 steals, 0.5 blocks, that's putrid. 43 from the field and 74 from the line on high volume is really bad. Obviously. And I know there's going to be people who are like, man, you just can't have him in category leagues. I think that's clear garbage, but people will think that. But what if, and I've baked some improvements into his game for this season, not necessarily bigger, huge defensive stats, but rookies generally are inefficient and they generally improve. But what if he actually goes bananas? We've seen big jumps forward. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander last season. A few years ago, Brandon Ingram, gigantic steps forward in efficiency numbers. Josh Giddey jumped up 7 field goal percentage points last season. What if Paolo becomes a 50 guy from the field, 75 from the line, gets a steal, 0.7 blocks because he's playing more center, goes 27, not 27, let's say 25, 8, and 5. That's a top 30 even category league guy. And maybe a top 20 points league guy. I'm not saying it's going to happen. But again, that is not hard to see. Unless you just believe, well, a rookie is a rookie and they are going to do the exact same thing every year and shoot 42% and 72 from the line. If you think he's going to do that, then okay, that's fine. But it's not hard to squint and see an improvement in shooting numbers for Paolo. And the other one is Jalen Suggs, who admittedly I was relatively high. I think I had him at 5 or 6 in that draft, about where he went, but I was very adamant that he should have gone ahead of Scotty Barnes. And honestly, at this point, it's very clearly wrong. Suggs is still he is an elite defender. He just cannot do anything offensively. The shooting is just not good. He's had a couple little stretches of good shooting, but it just hasn't been good enough. That's it for him, right? If he just turns into a guy that can shoot, well, he will play 30-plus minutes next to Fultz. He will get maybe 1.7 steals. He might get 4.5 assists. He could very easily blow through. I like him as a later round pick. I don't know that it's going to work out. But there's very clear upside capabilities, I think, with Suggsy, and I'd love to see him. I'd love to see him realize them. It's an upside opportunity. But the guy that is, I believe, fairly locked in to start at point guard is Markelle Fultz. Let's take him under the lens. I said at the start of the show that we're finally getting a healthy offseason from Fultz because last season we were ready to go. He was underranked in drafts. I was like, I love taking this guy late. And then he had a toe fracture and missed the first, 6 weeks of the season. The year before, it was an ACL. So he is healthy. We hope that nothing foolish goes on at training camp. One thing let's just run through what Fultz's numbers were last season. He averaged 14 points with, actually, have a look at it. He was ranked the highest ranked player last season for this team. That's interesting. 14 points in 30 minutes only a night. Half a three. 4 rebounds, almost 6 assists, 1.5 steals, 51 from the field and 78 from the line. How was he able to be a 51% shooter when he's not considered a good shooter? Well, this graph here shows you he never took threes. He shot 31% on threes. That's not a disaster, but he never took them. Look at a bloke who's a point guard playing 30 minutes a night and had 6 weeks where he didn't hit a single three and 2 more where he hit 1. The highest amount of threes he hit in a week was the second week that he returned and he hit 5. And then it was 0-2-2-0-1, 3-0-0-1, 2-2-2-2, 0-3-2. He just never took threes. And you have to understand that when you're in drafts, he's not going to help you in that 3-point category at all. But that doesn't really matter. That helps him probably more than if he started taking threes because it keeps him with a high field goal. In the past, he used to be a bad free throw guy, and he's actually pretty good at that. 78% last season. 87th overall in Yahoo points leagues. 81st in ESPN points leagues last season per game, and in -1 head-to-head, he was 74th. He was really quite good and is still being maybe a little bit underrated, I think, at the moment. Let's look at what his usage was. There was some improvements as the season went on, but he was able to be fairly strong, even in weeks when he was having 20 usage. He does not need to be getting 27 usage, which makes him a perfect fit next to Paolo and next to Wagner. He doesn't need to do that. He doesn't need to be a scorer. 6.5 assists, 1.6 steals, good percentages, solid rebounds. Now, my thing would be that what if Paolo and Franz just really dominate the ball? And that limits Fultz somewhat. And that's a legitimate concern. Fultz's rankings at the moment, though, and ADPs, they're a little bit all over the place. Like, he's at 95 on Yahoo. I love that. He's at 132 on ESPN. That is insane. It makes no sense. But he's ranked 74th on ESPN. So that number, it's going to come in without any real question. And he's ranked, but then on ESPN points leagues, he's ranked at 128, which is ridiculously low. It's no reason for him to be that low. So when you're looking at Fultz, it's going to depend a lot on where you're drafting as to what his value is. But it is, he maintained those numbers last season, as you can see, top 90 across the board in every format. And it's not like he needed this big usage to be able to get there. And even if we look at his minutes per week, like, it was relatively solid. But again, he averaged under 30 minutes a game, 29.6. Only hit 100 minutes a couple of times during the season. And he was still that good. So we could argue that there is upside for him to get better if he plays more minutes, although getting more of those minutes is probably going to be a little bit tough given the other players around. But I will note on this graph, you'll see at the end when they started to shut guys down, the minutes dropped. And then as he returned from his toe injury, a couple of real low minute weeks, if we take those two outliers, the start and end of the season off, he would have averaged about 31, 32 a night through those middle patches. So that is worth noting, that when you play, a third of his season was wiped out due to injury to begin with, and then sort of a shutdown at the end and a slow ramp up to begin with. In these middle 6-7 weeks, where maybe we could expect that's what he does for the season, that there's more upside in those minutes. His category league rank, pretty interesting. Again, started off slow, but look how many top 50 or close to top 50 weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 top 50 weeks in -1 head-to-head rankings. There were some weeks where he dropped off. Again, end of the season, started the season when those minutes were low. But just really strong stuff. And again, you're getting him ADP outside top 100 on ESPN. Like 90s on Yahoo. I actually think there's a decent amount of value still there. Not quite as much, but there is still value in some of those formats. His Darko DPM change graph is interesting. Obviously, started out, I thought, pretty okay. Despite the early injury in Philly, when he came onto the scene first couple games, looked fine. And then things started to go sideways, and he started to actually regress as a player through the end of the 19-20 season, had the ACL injury there, and now he's just started to slowly improve. And through the beginning of last season, he turned from a guy that was sort of dropping in his career to really turning it around to improvement. Now, he's still not classed as a positive DPM player, but it's getting really close, and we're back into improvement stage from Fultz, which I think part of it is the fact that he just was injured so much, and now he's not, and we get a crack at to see what he's able to do. But I want to go into this basketball index headshot plot. We've got two things here. Y-axis is off-ball gravity percentile. How much gravity do you have? What does that mean? Like, how much attention do you draw when you don't have the ball? And the other one is box creation, which is your ability to create using box score stats, a stat that was invented by Ben Taylor, taking into consideration the way that you're able to set up points for yourself and for your teammates also. And so that's on the x-axis in terms of percentile. The guys that I've got him paired with there, well, I've got his own teammate Jalen Suggs and Cole Anthony. I've got notorious non-shooting passing point guard Timothy John McConnell in that mix as well. I've got low usage point guard Tyus Jones in that mix there also, as well as De'Aaron Fox, a guy that has struggled at times with his shooting. So a few things stand out to me here is that when we're looking at Jalen Brunson's actually the one, top right corner. Jalen Brunson, very high off-ball gravity and very high box creation. So he's not a Jalen Brunson guy. I use Jalen Brunson because in the past he's been sort of a lower volume three-point guy. He's not there. What I find interesting that his box score creation's pretty good, Fultz. It's not as good as his teammate Cole Anthony, and it's not as good as Tyus Jones, not as good as TJ McConnell, and not as good as De'Aaron Fox. And the McConnell one is really interesting. And the fact that McConnell graded out as having better off-ball gravity was a little bit of a concern. In fact, every player on this graph had better off-ball gravity except for his teammate Jalen Suggs, which, we're not talking Suggs here, but combining those two together with that bad off-ball gravity is maybe not a good idea. So we'll get to that later on. But the fact that he's not able to have that level of gravity, and he's still good. His box creation's around 90th percentile, but a bunch of other guys are able to do more with the ball in their hands. It's not quite a red flag, but it's a little bit of something where I go, I think that he's locked in as the starter. I think he's going to play 30, 31 minutes, maybe more. I think he was really key to what they were doing last season, but it's not without folly. It's not without, maybe this doesn't work. He's also an unrestricted free agent coming up. That's why I'm not reaching. Like I said, he had those 5 or 6 top 50 weeks, not going nowhere near him in the top 50. And if his rank or ADP comes into 60, I'm going to be like, no, thank you. I'm not doing anything to do with that. But at 90, there's still some value. But there are just a couple of red flags in terms of how he plays off the ball, how that works when Paolo and Franz might up their usage, how that works with Anthony Black in town, and when he's not creating at a super, super high level. I think it has to give us not a complete element of pause, but at least something there. I found this team really interesting in terms of trying to find sleepers, because they were a team where in some situations this guy was a sleeper, in others he wasn't. Like Fultz, like an ADP of 132, absolutely huge sleeper. Rank 74 on ESPN, I'm not sure that's not really a sleeper. It's about right, maybe too high. And the same goes with guys like Franz Wagner, who even on ESPN alone has an ADP of 84. Okay, that's pretty good. And a rank of 50. Oh, there was absolutely no value in taking him at 50. So, we'll get to Paolo a little bit later, but the one who sort of stood out to me was Wendell Carter Jr. There is nobody who is starting ahead of this guy. Yes, injuries have consistently been an issue. He gets smacked in the eye, or he bloody has a plantar fasciitis issue. And Wendell was, he's still 24 only. He only played 30 minutes. He averaged 15 and 9 with 1.5 threes, 2.5 assists, 0.6 blocks. Now, in the past, when he played for the Bulls, he actually could block shots. And he has shown at times to be a better passer than this. I don't think that's going to happen on this team. He's just a really rock-solid center that doesn't get value from blocks, but helps in other areas. And I just think that these numbers, ranked 99 on Yahoo, an ADP of 99, I don't really understand why it's that low. Like last season on Yahoo Points Leagues, he was 86th. I think he might actually be better than that. Like he might not. Is he going to play under 30 again, or does he go to 31 or 32? It's possible. I just think in most situations here with Wendell, it's hard to see him not beating these 99s. Now, his Fantrax ADP is 86. It's not terrible, but I don't know if it represents value. But then you go to ESPN, he's ranked 109th. He's got an ADP of 112. That's like round 10. I love him in that spot. And his points league rank, even though it's higher at 94, well, I think he's a better points league player than that. He finished on ESPN, 94th last season? I think he can jump up into the 80s. Like, again, that's 94 dealing with plantar fasciitis and playing under 30 minutes. I think he's 24. He hasn't stopped improving. I think that it depends what you've done in other rounds. If you've gone really safe with limited upside players, you probably don't take Wendell unless he falls to round 10. But if you've taken a bunch of upside flyers and they might not hit, like there's a value in taking him round 9. I think there's a little bit of something there for him. And there's a little bit of something for you if you want to join into the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl, because the question that you'll have to answer on this entry form, which is linked down below, is what is Wendell Carter Jr.'s Yahoo ADP at the time of me recording this, which is on the 26th of September. But you don't need to know, because you don't need to look it up. I'm going to tell you what it is. It's 99. It's just 99. Just go write 99 in the entry form. That is linked down below. Let's talk fantasy busts, and I am putting Paolo Banchero here, but I'm doing it really cautiously. I didn't have Paolo as the number 1 player in that last year's draft class. I had him at number 2. He sort of did similar things to I thought, except he was able to get to the line way more. And obviously that hurt in fantasy because he took too many shots there. But for points leagues, and this is part of it where we get one of the biggest discrepancies, he was amazing in a points league. Paolo Banchero last season was the 57th ranked player in a Yahoo Points League. In the ESPN Points League, he was the 87th ranked player. That's as a rookie. Like, he is going to be better than this. I feel really confident in that. But those ranks are just too high for a category league when, again, straight category rankings would put him fairly low down. But even like a -1 ranking has him at 86 last season. I'm not willing to take him at an ADP of 59. I think he can beat it, but there's just bust risks there. Fantrax ADP 61. ESPN ranks 68. Yahoo ranks 65. I just think it's probably a round or two too high. You are hoping that he takes those improvements. And I think, and like I said earlier with the breakout section on him, I think he can do it. Am I projecting him to be at that level? Not quite. But then you go on to him in points leagues. Like, he's ranked 30th on ESPN points leagues. I actually think that's okay. I don't think that's a wrong ranking. I think he could be the 30th best player. He's at 65 for Yahoo, and in Yahoo points, I'll take him. He's a top 50 guy really easily. So he's maybe even a sleeper on Yahoo points. ESPN points, he's probably ranked about correct. But there's a chance that maybe he's even the 100th best guy in categories. So when you take him at 60, it's probably going to blow up in your face. So there are concerns there. And you can have faith that he is going to get better, like I do. But I'm not going to just bake all of that in and say, well, I'm taking him at 50 because I think all these things are going to come together right now. Someone else can do that, but if he falls to me at the right spot, I love it. I'm just, with those numbers, he's not falling to me at the right spot. And yeah, you can't feel 100% confident in doing it. Again, very clearly to me, he is a top 100 player. Very clearly. But a first 5 rounds guy, I'm not really sure about that. And now we just take a look at injuries because, yeah, of course, it's old mate, Jonathan Isaac, who had a groin injury, another surgery after finally coming back after 3 years out from an ACL injury. Came back, played super limited minutes, was hyper aggressive in terms of usage. And I don't think we can really read anything into Isaac's numbers from last season. I'll go through them. It's just impossible to take anything out of them that's useful, I don't think. He played 11 minutes a night. He averaged 5 points. But he got 1.3 steals in 11 minutes. You say, well, Josh, what if he plays 30? That's 4.5 steals. Okay, that's just not, or 4 steals. That's obviously not real, right? He had a 21 usage. He's never going to maintain that if he plays even 20 minutes a night. Like, he's just not going to do it. But I also wouldn't look at him as a 56% free throw shooter, which is what he shot. I think he's better than that. He shot 42 from the field. He also didn't block any shots when he'd been a good shot blocker. So steals were through the roof. Usage was way up. Minutes were way down. Blocks were way down. I don't think any of it matters. All that we know is he came back and he played 11 games. He played 11 minutes a game. 132 minutes that he played? Is that right? 121 minutes. So I don't think we take anything out of it. And then he got injured again and had another surgery. And I don't think they view him as a huge part of the future. But I don't know that. He's still only 26. I think he is going to get a shot at rotation minutes, but 50 games? That'd be a miracle. If I did a whole show on 30 late round flyers you can take, and I didn't include him. I don't have a problem if you want to do it, but it's just hard for me to see. He's got absolutely zero path to starting outside of injuries. It's just never going to happen. Can he get 20 off the bench? Maybe, but they also just brought in Joe Ingles as well, who's going to play some of those minutes there. So I don't see it with Isaac. I know there's going to be Isaac believers out here. Maybe he just he's going to concentrate more on his sporting apparel company or his book tour or whatever. I don't know where he sits on this team. I don't think it's particularly encouraging. I think he might be at risk of being traded. But I think the main guy who's at risk of being traded is Cole Anthony. I think Cole Anthony's a little bit underrated by some at the moment. I think he's a solid enough point guard in the mold of an Emmanuel Quickley, probably better than a Kobe White. He is the best post-game interviewer in the entire NBA. Not that matters for fantasy or real-life NBA, but he's like that. There seem to be quite a few people, though, in the NBA who don't seem to like him, and I've seen that come out multiple times, and they just, your dad's rich and you didn't grow up like us, and does that matter? I don't know, maybe, but I've heard that multiple times, which is weird. He's a restricted free agent. They've drafted Black and Suggs over him in the last 2 seasons, and I just don't think they view him in that role. I think they will look to deal him, and I'll say this all the time, the Spurs need to get in on this sort of stuff. They should be targeting Cole Anthony. I think Cole Anthony would be a great fit on the Spurs. They need to get some forward and center depth back because currently their backup center's Mo Wagner, El Gogo Badadze, who I think are fine, but you'd want to get some more forwards again if you're relying upon Isaac and Akiki to be your backup 4. Well, you need more players there. So I think that Cole, I wouldn't be shocked if he's traded even before the season starts. Contract year players, one of them is Cole. He's a restricted free agent. There's Markelle Fultz, who's unrestricted. Gary Harris is unrestricted. Goga Badadze is unrestricted.
Problem with my Gogo-mobile. Gogo-mobile? No, not the da. Not the da.
And Chuma KK is a restricted guy who I'm really worried about where he sits. Missed his whole first year as ACL injury, had more knee injuries, really looked quite bad last season, I thought. So some curious decisions need to be made there. Could Goga take over from Mo Wagner as the backup center? He started to do that at the end of last season. I thought he played well over in the World Cup as well, and he actually does. We'll talk about it in a second. He's got a really fantasy-friendly game. And then we get back to that Fultz situation, but maybe they just don't think that he is the point guard of the future. He is an unrestricted free agent. Maybe him and Anthony are just gone, and we're going with Suggs and Howard and Black as the future of backcourt. It's possible. So what are the rotation risks? If Paolo plays backup center, it's going to help. He's going to have higher field goal percentage. He's going to have more block numbers. It's going to help his numbers. The guys there, as I said, it's Goga and Mo Wagner who are in that position. So it's not like it's huge level of competition. But if he doesn't, then it leads to downward squishing. Fewer minutes for Franz at the 4. That means fewer minutes to go 3 guards and play Harris at the 3 or Suggs at the 3 or even Black at times at the 3 or Jed Howard. It changes quite a bit. That's the real opening there on that team is power forward depth, but center depth. And if Paolo can push up, it changes a lot. And then does Black actually even play a sizable role? Because the question here is, where does he do it? And who doesn't play for him to play? Because there's Fultz, there's Harris, there's Suggs, there's Anthony, and then there is Mr. Black.
Mr. Black.
I was not particularly high. Always remember this when I'm talking about Anthony Black. When I scouted him, not particularly high on him as a player. Don't like his fantasy game either. I wouldn't have picked him at 6 at all. I had no interest in it. I would have taken him behind Kason Wallace for sure. I'm just not that interested in him. He's got good size. He's quite a smart player. He's a good defender, but I worry that his lack of shooting and the lack of respect he gets with his shot and the fact that he's just not special enough in those other areas, I don't think, especially offensively, to generate that level of respect and value. I'm not sure he's there. And while it's unfair, like we've seen this play out in Orlando with Alfred Payton, right? It's not the same player, but a defense-first point guard who can pass a little bit but can't really shoot, and then it goes to shit really quickly. And I worry a little bit about that with Black, but they invested pick number 6 in him. They believe in him a lot. So does he play? Where does he play? And who doesn't play? Someone's not going to play. They can't all play together. But if Black gets in there, that's going to impact Suggs. It's going to probably impact Fultz. It's going to impact Cole Anthony. All of these guys could have value, but they can't all do it together. And that's one of the big question marks around this team. This is why we need to watch this rotation carefully, because there's a lot of guys that if they actually played big roles, they'd be very good. We know John Isaac's that guy. If he gets 27 minutes a night and he's healthy, he's a top 50 player without question. Mo Wagner, if Wendell Carter got hurt and Mo Wagner was the starter, he would be a 12-team league player. And so would his backup, or maybe the guy that's ahead of Mo, in Goga Badadze. If they played 27 minutes a night as starters, easy 12-teamers. And the other one's Cole Anthony. But this is never going to happen for Cole unless there's multiple injuries. But that's why we need to watch to see how the rotation plays out and how trades go down. But there are 4 guys, all bench players, that if they force themselves into larger roles, they'd have very, very good fantasy upside. The depth chart, I think they're going to start Fultz at point guard, and then backup guards are going to be Suggs, Anthony, Black, and Kevon Harris as a two-way guy. But that's where you can see the squish comes in. Suggs, Anthony, and Black, all off the bench. I probably should put it as Black and Anthony in that, or otherwise it sounds like I'm calling them one person. Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, Anthony Black. On the wing, I think they're going to start Gary Harris because you just need shooting. Now, it's very, very easy to argue, and I'm never going to argue against you here, that Harris isn't a part of the future, so let's just see what else happens. But I don't think that you're going to play Cole Anthony and Fultz together. Suggs and Fultz together leads to a huge spacing issue, and it's going to be even worse if Black and Fultz play together. So maybe it has to be Harris, or would they just say, screw it, let's see what Jed Howard can do. He's long. He theoretically can shoot. I don't think he could do anything else, but maybe. So this other position is just wide open. The one that makes sense is Gary Harris from an absolute fit perspective right now. He's good. He can shoot. But he obviously can't stay healthy, and he's got nothing to do with the future of this team. But every other one here, Suggs, Anthony, Black, Howard, there's huge question marks over. The other wing on this squad is Caleb Houston, who I'm not really sure is a future rotation player. Forwards, it is Wagner, who is going to start there, and I'm waiting on a breakout for him. And then backing him up is Isaac, it is Jingling Joe Ingles, it's Jumra KK, and then there's Admiral Schofield, who is back, who's played a bit of small ball center last season as well. And then for the bigs, I'm labeling Paolo as a big because I think he's going to play more at center than he would at small forward this season. And then Wendell Carter Jr., and the backups are Mo Wagner and Goga Badadze. In terms of how Durant and Bazemore looks at him, Durant boosts Paolo up, Durant boosts Goga up, and it boosts Cole Anthony up quite considerably as well. And for Dynasty, there's a lot of value here. Both Franz and Paolo come in as top 15 Dynasty players on my Bazemore metric. Suggs is a top 100 guy. I mean, iffy on that, but it does like some of the things that he did. Cole Anthony, a top 110 player, and Anthony Black is a top 120 player on Bazemore. So tons of Dynasty value. Now, can't all work out. Suggs, Anthony, and Black can't all be that good on this team. But there's enough there to suggest that even if things get split up, that they have a little bit of value in them. And that will do it for me today. Don't forget to follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. And if you are here on YouTube, thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.